Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. This is Hashtag No Limits. I am your host, Shelley Kino, and Hashtag No Limits is about people who society places limits upon, but who have busted through those limits. Ophelia says in Hamlet, we know who we are, but not who we will be. And I believe that to be 100% true, and that there is no better example of that than the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. The caterpillar literally dissolves into its cells, and then it reforms into the butterfly while it's in the cocoon. That's not all the struggling that it has to go through. It then has to fight to get out of the cocoon in order for its wings to have the strength they need to take it wherever it's going to go. None of that can be easy, but neither is busting through the limits that society places on people. And society does it all the time. Individuals do it all the time. The medical professionals, the educational staff, people at work, we just all do it and we don't realize that we're doing it. And so I bring this show to you because I'm trying to help us catch ourselves placing those limits on others and then help us figure out a better way to work with those around us that we have placed those limits on. So I'm excited today to have Katie Whittier. I found Katie on LinkedIn and I just reached out to her and I said, hey, I think your story would be great because she just recently found out that she has autism. And you can tell she's not a child. And so I'm very interested to find out how this has happened and kind of what life was like before and what life is like now. And so enough about me, and they don't join to hear me. So Katie, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Katie Whittier. I live in the greater Seattle area. I live not far from Mount Rainier. So if you see me looking this direction, I actually have a beautiful view of it today. It's pretty exciting. I own my own consulting firm, Karapace Consulting. I founded it about 1.5 years ago. And it is the main reason why I decided to seek my autism diagnosis. It is not something I knew about when I was growing up, not at all. I did have, my youngest brother was severely disabled, so I was very familiar with the disability community, and I would say I had an affinity there, right? Like I cared about my brother and I cared about the care that was available to him in that community, which probably made it maybe a little bit more approachable for me to even think about things like neurodiversity, neurodivergence as an adult, because this is a world that I'm pretty comfortable in. But yeah, I knew, as I think a lot of young people knew growing up, that I was a little different, right? And I was very lucky. As a child, I was able to find my way into kind of people that were like me, kind of outcasts, people who didn't feel like they fit in, because I loved music. And so music was my outlet to be able to create social connections with people, and really create an identity for myself without having to try to fit into the more mainstream way of being. So honestly, it helped me, I think, mask a lot of my autistic traits as a young person. And it worked, well into college. I studied music into college and couldn't figure out how to make a good career out of it. And that's when things started to get sticky for me. Looking back, I think my young adulthood and right up until my mid-30s, masking became an adrenaline-driven game for me. And you can run on adrenaline for quite a while, but there is a point in everyone's life where you just can't anymore. And that was my mid-30s, and I started to have pretty major meltdowns. I would burn out at just about every job that I had. And also the thing that happens in your mid-30s is you start to have more visibility in your career, right? If you have had any amount of success in your early career, you're going to start having more visibility in your mid-30s. You're going to be managing people. You're going to get promotions. You're going to be asked, in my case, to step out in front of TV cameras and make statements on behalf of organizations. And all well and good, unless you are coming from a place where you're masking all of the time, which was where I was. And I think at that point, my late 30s, I couldn't do it all. I couldn't mask in front of the media at the same time that I was masking in front of my coworkers to fit in, at the same time that I was masking at home to try to keep a marriage together that eventually fell apart. All of these things really caught up to me in my mid to late 30s. And I just thought something was wrong with me. I thought, looking around at my peers, my colleagues, the people who I had graduated college with, and seeing how their success seemed effortless. Now, obviously, part of this is that social media makes everything seem just cheerier than it actually is.
Right.
That's part of it. But there was also an ease with which a lot of my peers were moving through the world that seemed totally foreign to me. And honestly, it made me want to bury myself further and mask even more, because I was becoming more and more aware of a deficit that I didn't understand within myself. So to back up just a little bit, I first encountered the concept of autism being a spectrum and looking like manifesting in different ways, probably in 2010. And I was reading an article about synesthesia. I don't know if you know about synesthesia, but it's where you confuse your senses. Like people with synesthesia might see a color every time they hear a certain type of sound. And this is...
Oh, is that what that's called?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't know it had a name.
Yeah. I love it. And when I read about it, I felt really sad that other people didn't have this. I thought everyone did. But it taught me a lot. I'm like, oh, okay. That's one of the reasons I like music so much, is because when I'm having a good musical experience, I'm having flavors and colors and textures, and it's an overwhelming sensory experience. And that can be good. That can be really like kind of terrifying sometimes too. But most of the time with the music that I like so much, it's a fantastic experience. So I really do feel sad most of the world doesn't have this. And in that article, towards the end, it mentioned that synesthesia has been associated with the autism spectrum. And I don't remember what the percentage is now, but there is a percentage of autistics, and I would be among them now, who have synesthesia. And it is certainly a contributor to sensory overload, for sure, because you're experiencing a lot of senses all at once. Has this good side, can really be overwhelming in certain circumstances. So that was 2010. I was still pretty early in my career. I read about it. I thought it was interesting. I thought, okay, that might be me. Not going to think about it that much more, right? Because autism can be scary, right? We're trained to think about it in a really narrow way. But it is a spectrum for a reason, and it manifests in so many ways. The next time I ran into it was 2018, and I came across a series of really great articles and blog posts about Asperger's. And I had noticed, my early career, I spent a lot of time in politics, working for really high-level politicians like U.S. Senator Patty Murray here in Washington State. I helped on Obama's first primary campaign. So really big names, and meeting some very incredible people along the way. And I did have a hunch that some of my favorite people that I met during that time period had to have been Asperger's. Absolutely had to have been. And I loved them because they were a little bit unpredictable. They could draw these really interesting insights out of disparate pieces of data that I wouldn't have connected myself. I just really fascinated individuals. So I was reading about it, and the more that I read about Asperger's, number one, I knew I had an affinity for folks that were probably on the spectrum that way. And number two, a lot of what I read resonated with my experience. In particular, I read one gal writing about how hard it is for folks on the spectrum to deal with government forms, things like tax forms, things like go to the DMV. And I'm like, this is me 1000%. I can't think of a form that I have filled out right on first try, like ever. I just can't do it. I mean, I can write books, I can write stories, like I could do all these things, but you sit me down in front of a tax form and I will sweat through my clothes. It's just too hard. So that resonated, but a bunch of other things did too. I'm definitely introverted. I've known that about myself, but reading about the depth of introversion and I'm not going to say aversion to people, but just kind of a disconnect between what a person on a spectrum is sensing in somebody and then what's actually happening around them, that resonated with me in a big way. Two, But again, I didn't really think a whole lot about it. This was 2018.
Right.
I brought it home to my boyfriend at the time, now my husband. And he's like, well, that explains a lot. But again, we didn't explore it in
Right.
depth. Fast forward to 2020, and I was in definitely the most stressful time period of my life. I was living alone. I had just moved out of state down to Portland for a job, and the job was really overwhelming. There were a lot of responsibilities and a lot of change that was happening all at once, and I had a major moment of burnout. I had a shutdown. I would now classify it as an autistic meltdown, and it resulted in me having to ask for time off. And my boss at the time, she was fabulous, and she did say, "Yeah, 3 weeks of a break would be really, really healthy for you right now." So I took a small leave of absence, and in those 3 weeks, I met with a therapist who, very kindly, as nicely as she could, she said, "I think you're a highly sensitive person, an HSP." And I could have punched her. There's no way I'm sensitive. I am this tough person. I work on tough political campaigns. I do tough interviews with media, right? This was so much my identity. This was so much my mask. This was so much who I thought I had to be in order to survive in the type of world that I was living. And that honestly is probably true. I had to be that person. So to be told, well, it's not going to work for you because you're built a different way, really hurt.
Yeah.
Which shows, I think, a lot of the ableism that we, internalize everywhere. I could not accept what she was telling me about myself. Fortunately, the whole world shut down for a pandemic about a week after this happened. And I had all of the time in the world to figure out what that high sensory part of me needed so bad. And I will say, I mean, the pandemic was tough, right? For everyone. There are people who lost loved ones. It was a terrifying period of time. And also, it was the happiest time in my life, bar none. I was totally alone. I didn't have demands to go anywhere, be anything. I worked from home. I could be creative and have space to do these things that I had been hoping to do someday, writing a book, things like that. I suddenly could do that. I had the energy for that. And it was 100% life-changing for me to see what it was like to operate in an environment that I knew I needed versus forcing myself into the environment that the world said it needed from me. That is definitely why I opened my own business. Towards the end of the pandemic, this is when it really became clear the extent to which I'm different from other people. I was noticing even my other introvert friends who at the start of the pandemic were super excited about all the shutdowns. They were just hungry to get back out into the world, right? Mm-hmm. And even 2 or 3 days back in the office sounded like a good time for them. And I could not relate. So I started internalizing this again. Okay, there is something very wrong with me. There's something broken in me. I really don't want to go back to brunches on Sundays. I really don't want to go back to that lifestyle. And so I've mostly refused. So getting to the point, this spring, I was very much needing to grow this business that I started last year. My first year in business, I did pretty well. It was an economy where people didn't have enough workers to do the job, so consultants like me would get snapped up, really quick. Mm-hmm. This year, totally different story. Rumors of recession. I needed to grow my business in a much more intentional way, and I wanted to be more specific about the types of services I was offering too. So I enrolled in a business accelerator program, and fully aware of my past history with burnout, I knew I didn't want to dive into this program with both feet. I wanted to take it at my own pace, and I wanted to do it in a way that would be sustainable and not burn me out. Because if I got to a point of burnout with my own business, that's kind of the end of the road. Right. This is the thing that I'm doing so that I don't burn out at working for somebody else anymore, right? So right. I can't afford to lose this. So I knew this going into the accelerator program, and I wanted to get really clear on what my boundaries were. Well, in February, a woman, Laura Schaefer, reached out to me on LinkedIn. She sent me a connection request. And when I looked into who this person was, I was startled to discover that she is an autism professional. She helps people uncover their autism, work through an autism diagnosis. She's an autism expert. And I thought, how in the world did she find me?
There are
last year.
billions of people on the planet. How did she find me?
And I'm like, on the one hand, flattered. Ooh, people can find me because I've been trying to be more visible, right? I've been putting out blog posts more often. But my second thought was, oh no, my Asperger's is showing. All this extra visibility I'm doing is making it terribly obvious that I'm awkward, that I don't fit in. All these old insecurities surfacing all of a sudden. And I reached back out to her and I'm like, thanks for the connection request, but how did you find me? And she graciously wrote back, well, you had liked a post that I posted several weeks ago that I think one of our mutual friends must have shared. Fair enough. And yet still, the back of my mind, I'm like, no, she sees something that I need to really face. And at the time, I was doubling down on my business brand, which is around trust, and authenticity is absolutely central to that premise. You cannot build trust without being authentic. So I'd been having these internal conversations with myself of, at 41 years old, how much do I really understand about myself? And here Laura walks into the middle of this and inserts, oh, yeah, I do neurodivergence and stuff. And I thought, it's time. It's time for me to look into this thing that I've not wanted to see about myself for so long. And I did the most autistic things you could imagine. I read every book I could find on the subject. I read blog posts. I read articles. I really dove in deep. And I found that probably 65% of what I was looking at really resonated for me. The other 35% was a mix of things that didn't make sense to me, or at first I didn't think they applied. And then as I thought more about it, it would just lightning strike. This is true for me too. A good example of this is autistic stimming. And that's repetitive behaviors that autistics engage in essentially as a form of self-comfort. I'm like, well, I play with my jewelry, right? Every woman I know plays with their jewelry a little bit, twist my hair sometimes. The normal things. It can't be like autistic stimming. And I was sitting here at this computer one afternoon and felt the urge to get up and walk. I always feel the urge to get up and walk. It's why I can't work in an open office space. I love to pace, and I always pace in circles, counterclockwise, and I've done this since I was 2. I mean, as soon as I learned to walk, my parents tell me I was walking in circles, counterclockwise.
Oh, wow.
This is stimming, and this is something that I do. Daily, 2-3 times a day, left unchecked. I might spend a good part, like 90 minutes a day, pacing in circles. It's how I get my brain going. It's how I self-comfort. It's how I celebrate. I'm pretty sure after this podcast, I'm going to be pacing circles. It's an autistic stim. It just is. And so there were things like that where at first when I would read about a trait, it didn't resonate. And then all of a sudden it was like a light bulb clicked on and it's like, oh, this is true for me. And this is very, very, very true for me, and something I really haven't given space for or given the weight to. Like, this pacing actually does help me get unstuck when I'm working on client work. The reason I have this sudden urge to stand up and get away from the desk is because I'm stuck on what word comes next, or I'm stuck on, I do website design too, I'm stuck on a design element, or even how to fix a problem of, that's in the code. But I get up and I go make tea and I pace around the kitchen for a minute or two and I've got it. And so it's an extremely important thing that I do that I deny myself, or in an office setting, I'm denied that ability. If I get up and pace in an office setting, like I'd be disturbing people. I'd be taking up more space, all these other things. Plus, I would be hyper aware that other people are watching what's happening, which would probably prevent the revelation that comes when I start walking. So I started the accelerator course. I was immediately overwhelmed. That's when I decided, okay, it is time to talk to Laura. I can't pretend I don't know her anymore. But I sent her a note and I said I would like to start a diagnostic process with you. So what she does is it's an outside of the medical world diagnostic that is based on her actual diagnosis experience through NYU. So going through the medical route to get a diagnosis, it's tricky, it's expensive, it takes time, it's obviously kind of a one-size-fits-all thing that, especially for a woman my age who's so good and experienced at masking, it can be fruitless. It can come up with, well, you might be, but it's inconclusive. Or, we really don't see those traits in you. So I determined I didn't even want to go that route at all. It didn't seem like a return on that investment that made any sense for me. And it seemed like a high level of anxiety to get through that. I want less anxiety, period, everywhere in my life. So
I'm with you there.
Yeah, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. So Laura's process is, it's 3 steps, though she can shorten it into as few as 2 steps. But I wanted the full Monty. We did 3 weeks, 3 meetings over 3 weeks. And she does an interview that's based on, I think it is identical to what she had at NYU. And then she goes through the responses to that. And in the second week, talks to you about what you found. And in that second week, you come prepared with a written test, and you go through what your results were there. In both cases, I was squarely in the autism spectrum, like right in the middle of it. So not a little bit autistic, very, very typical, very what you would expect to see for any autistic, but especially a woman with autism. The third and optional meeting with Laura includes going through the CAT-Q, which is a masking quiz, a test to see how much you mask. And it was shocking to me when I went through that and saw just how much energy I was giving to masking. And it's like, no wonder I suffered from burnout at so many stages in my life. No wonder I want to avoid that so much. And the very first thing that came to me after taking the masking evaluation was, I want to claim as much of that energy back as I can. I don't want to keep wasting my energy being something that I'm not, because I want to have energy for all the things that I love. That, I think, was probably the most empowering piece of having an official autism diagnosis. On the one hand, it's super enlightening to look back on things and be able to see it in a new light, and to understand that, in my first marriage and in past jobs, I was giving it the best that I could, and even more than probably what I should have. And it still, didn't quite meet up to what you would expect, because I wasn't cut out for that, right? Or I was operating from a different place, pretending that I wasn't, because I didn't know better. So there was a lot of self-forgiveness in the autism diagnosis. But for me, the most empowering part was this permission to stop masking where I can, and even where I can notice that I'm masking. It's such a habit, right? So it's so hard to see where to start letting the mask down. But I am starting, and that's where all of the magic is. And so for people who are thinking about going through an autistic diagnosis process, if they've taken some of the online self-evaluations, they think they are, but they're like, I'm not sure that I want to go, the next extra step, I can affirmatively say it is worth it, because you start giving yourself permission to be you. And there is power in that. And I'll give one really big example. Special interests are extremely important to people on the autistic spectrum. They're extremely important. I have and always have had a bunch of special interests, and sometimes I will let them go after a couple months, and sometimes they are lifelong. And either way, they are extremely important. Well, people in my life, my family, friends, they can get tired of that. Like, I will be so into something and then not anymore, or so into something and they really don't care, So I've learned over the years to just suppress that and try to focus on just a few things, particularly the things that'll make me money. Not anymore. Now it is, the special interests are what drives my energy. The special interests are here for a reason. Autistics really make a difference in the world when we dive into those special interests. So I've given myself permission to follow those rabbit holes, let them go when I'm ready, or not at all, go as far as I want and as broad as I want. And my life is so much more interesting.
I bet.
Love it. So opening up new ideas about what I want to do with my business to get more closely aligned with the things that I care about. The thing that it really allowed me to do was to get serious about this concept of high sensitivity that the therapist introduced to my mind that I wanted to punch her for. And I'm ready to embrace it. I think my version of sensory overload for my autism, unlike some people might be overwhelmed by sounds and colors or textures. I mean, I have that to a certain extent, but where my big burnouts, my shutdowns, my meltdowns tend to come is from my emotional sensitivity. I'm empathic enough that I can feel my way into what others are experiencing. And I don't know how to manage that very well. So, special interest, I really want to get to know this. I want to befriend it. I want to figure out what is that sensitive side of me trying to tell me, because it's got to be here for a reason. Right?
Absolutely.
It can't just be this accident of nature. There's what I've read is HSPs, highly sensitive people, we're about 1 in 5 people on the planet. That's a lot of us. We've got to be here for a reason. And so I'm working through what that looks like for me. And it is changing how I think about my business now and the services that I want to offer. I know for a fact that empathy side of me makes me a better copywriter, which is a huge service that I offer. I love writing speeches because I do feel my way into what that spokesperson is like, how they like to speak, and what message that they want to bring. And it's been really successful for me. So I know that it has, economic value, this empathy that I have, but I think it goes beyond that. And the special interest that I'm diving into right now relates back to that burnout. I know burnout is a bigger deal in this world than we give it credit for. We think burnout is something that individuals just have to deal with and move on. And burnout leads to trauma, and trauma leads to consecutive burnouts. So compounding traumas. This is happening all over the place. And we just expect individuals to sleep it off, go to a weekend retreat and call it good. We expect them to have these built-in social networks that are capable of helping them through. This is not true, and we're not having a big enough conversation about the impacts of burnout. So that's a special interest I intend to follow to its bitter end. And to that end, I created a little metric that people can take to monitor and see if they're on the path to burnout. Because I think another trick to figuring out how to manage and deal with burnout is to notice it as early as possible. Because I don't notice until I am there. So getting more comfortable with recognizing the signs early and giving ourselves permission to intervene really early, start backing off even before we would feel like we should be backing off. I think that's super important. So I created a little 10-question burnout monitor for people. They can download it from my website, carapaceconsulting.com/burnout-monitor. Or just, right there on the homepage, you can click into Burnout Monitor and enter your email to get your copy of it. And I wouldn't just take the Burnout Monitor once. Like, I would take it if you're worried about burnout, or if you know you're a person who's inclined to burnout. I would take it, once a month, maybe once every 6 weeks, to make sure that you're still in a good spot. And if you're not, I give you full permission to take the intervention that you need. If that is taking a week off, even if it's unpaid, if that is saying, no, I am not going to brunch for the next 7 weekends with my friends. I mean, full permission to stop that whole rat race that we like to get ourselves into. Yeah, you find the burnout monitor right there in the tab.
Yeah. So for those who are listening, I did just pull up her website, and we are looking at the burnout monitor. It's on her website, and it's the far right tab. Because eventually these do get turned into podcasts with no video. So I did want to let people know what we were looking at. And yeah, her website is Karapace Consulting, KARAPACECONSULTING.com. And I was looking at your website before we came on today, and I apologize, I've sort of interjected into the middle of what you were saying there, but I found it really interesting. I honestly didn't know this before. So Carapace, for anyone else who doesn't know, is the protective outer shell of turtles, crabs, and similar creatures. It provides more than just protection. It gives otherwise vulnerable animals significant advantages for survival. And then she says, at Karapace, we view trust as the protective outer layer of any organization or initiative. And it's really interesting that is sort of your underlying motto, because Fran, who is joining us today, she and I do a podcast on Fridays. It's called Friday with Fran. And this past episode, we were talking about trust. and how trust is developed and why it's broken so easily, and just kind of all the things. And we're just two average people. Neither of us have backgrounds in psychology or sociology or any of the ologies. And so, it's just, I just found that really intriguing that, that is such a core part of what you do with your company. And she actually just said that she loves that you said, give yourself permission. Yeah,
Yes.
it's so true. We do not give ourselves permission to take care of ourselves.
Nope.
It's worse in women, but it definitely, I don't know, maybe it is worse in men, and maybe it's worse in men because they never do it.
Right.
Occasionally women will do it, but men, they're fine. They don't need any taking care of, Right. So maybe it really is worse in them. Maybe they do it even less than what we do. Right. But there's a couple things that you've said that I wanted to go back to, and I hope that's okay.
Yes, I covered a lot.
Okay. So one of the things that you mentioned the word mask or masking frequently.
Yes.
And for those who don't understand what that is, how it might appear, what it might look like, would you be able to go into some real depth into what masking is and maybe some of your own personal examples, if you don't mind?
Sure. Yeah. And I'll start by saying everybody masks. Neurotypical individuals, they mask as well. I mean, anytime you're putting yourself in a situation where you've got to, shore up your behaviors and if you walk into church, you're not going to drop the F-bomb, That's a mask.
At least we hope not.
If you want to stay there very long and make friends, maybe you don't. But
Right.
Those are the types of masks that can be super helpful. They're aware of social context, and they just smooth out social interactions really well. So it is important to have masks and to cultivate them in the right situations and to be aware of when you can put them on. But you super need to understand that they come with a lot of energy drain. And I actually heard the best discussions early on about masking coming out of the BIPOC community. So folks of color talking about how much they mask in order to fit in the white world that they're asked to live in, right? And we had, robust discussions about, everybody masks. And that is absolutely true, but there are folks especially with different levels of privilege that are masking a lot more than others. And, that takes energy. When you're applying a lot of energy to masking, there are things that go by the wayside, right? Self-care being a pretty big one. If you're spending so much of your energy masking, then you're probably only going to have the energy at the end of the day to sit in front of the TV, right? That's not going to give you the energy to go out for a walk at the end of the day. You just aren't going to have it. Your energy is spent. So being aware of when you are wearing the mask and when you can take those masks off is a superpower, one that I'm still learning. I'm still, figuring out which masks I wear. I know for sure when I'm getting close to burnout that I mask by being funny. And the way that I like to be funny tends more and more and more towards cynicism, the more burnt out that I get. So it's pretty unhealthy, I would say. Sarcasm has a place, but if that is your primary way to find relief through humor, you're probably on the road to burnout big time. So that's a mask I now know when I start down a path that feels uncomfortable. I'm expending a lot of energy wearing that sarcastic mask to belittle the things that are threatening me, right? That are making me work harder, spin harder, whatever. Masks are any time that you are underplaying, downplaying things that are really important to you. So I think about my special interests. I almost always, when I talk about the books that I write, have been known to say, I write books that never get published. Like that extra little thing at the end just downplays this whole huge piece of my life. And I'm training myself not to, to say I write books. I'm sure they'll get published someday. I mean, at a minimum, I'm going to publish them myself.
Right.
So I write books. And so I'm dropping that. That's a mask I would pick up because I wanted to be likable, relatable. I wanted to not stand out. That's a mask I would assume. So masks have, they drain your energy. They also diminish your potential and your ability to own who you really are capable of being. So I'm trying to be more aware of that. A mask I definitely have to pick up a lot to be in social situations, which I don't put myself in social situations very often, is talking about movies. I don't watch a lot of movies. I don't watch a lot of TV. And so people who do, which is kind of everybody, they'll want to talk about their favorite show, and they'll want to talk about, what happened on, I can't even name Succession. I think there's something some people talk about a lot now. I can't. So I put on the mask and I listen and I'm like, oh, tell me more, but I'm not interested.
Yep.
And again, it's because I care about these people enough that I want their interests to be, to be
validated.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's a mask that I put on, and I know that I'm going to try to exit this conversation as soon as possible so that I have enough energy for whatever comes next. So masks are complicated. Everyone does it. If you can become aware of your mask so that you know when you can take one off, you're going to be so much better with your energy management and how you show up in the world. Another one, which I feel a little guilty about, honestly, at the beginning of the pandemic, I stopped wearing makeup. And I only put it on for special occasions now, like this. I actually put on a little makeup today. Generally, I don't wear a lot of it, and society asks us to do that as women. Like, we're supposed to show up as these polished, beautiful things. And for me, at first, it was very much a time savings. Like, I don't want to spend the extra, 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at night taking it off. That's 70 minutes a week. I want that 70 minutes a week for something else. I really do. So that was really what drove me to it. But, it's also, makeup looks good for about an hour, and then, I don't know, I've got oily skin. So after the first hour, I don't look great in it anymore. It doesn't do anything for me. So being able to give that up and really accept what I look like without the makeup on and show up in public spaces, without the makeup on, it feels great. I feel cleaner and I can rub my eyes when they itch. It's the small things.
Yeah, that's funny. My mother-in-law just recently realized that I don't wear makeup ever.
Nice.
I will put a little lip gloss on, and that's about it. And she and my husband and I were having a conversation, and she said something about my makeup, and he said she doesn't. He said the last time I think I've seen her wear makeup was our wedding day. Yeah, and that's the last. And my mother-in-law's like, what? She wears makeup. I'm like, no, I've been in plays and I've had to get, makeup put on me for big events, where I'm like, oh, okay, I should probably put some makeup on. And I've had to go to my daughter and ask her, do you have anything? Because I don't own anything other than, like I said, some lip gloss, and that's it. Nice. And I'm a strong Christian, and I very much believe that God has designed us exactly the way we're supposed to be. Nice. And the exactly what you said about women in the makeup, it's just never been a thing for me. I tried it. I shouldn't say never. I tried it, of course, when I was in grade school and high school, because that's what all the girls were doing. But I'm like, this isn't me. This is, and I don't know that I had the word masking in my head, but I was like, I'm covering up who I am. I'm making myself look more appealing to others. Right. And so that's interesting that you brought up the makeup thing. And another group of people I think that do a ton of masking is the disability community in general. Yes. Not, as you said, the BIPOC population, but also, our students in schools, our adults that are in working environments that, for exactly yourself, there are things, and this kind of leads me to the other question that I had wanted to ask from earlier, is the stimming. Yeah. I'm an education consultant. I help families and school districts navigate through the special education world and try to help everyone at the table, the IEP table, understand what everyone else is saying and come to a collaborative working environment, because there's a child at the base of that we are helping to grow to their fullest potential. Yes. And so often I've sat in those meetings, either when I was teaching full time or now, and somebody will say, oh, well, they don't necessarily always call it stimming, but they'll say, oh, they're always tapping their hand on the desk, or they're always, bouncing their leg up and down, or I'm like, that's a need that they're filling in themselves. But then there's also the kids who they're more masking their behaviors because they're trying so hard to keep certain behaviors controlled and hidden so that they can fit in to the classroom and fit in with their peers. And you talked about that. You masked all through your childhood, and finding those people who were more like you and more accepting. And I think we need to do better as a society of saying, you know what, and I was glad that you used the examples of like people twirl their hair, they fiddle with their makeup. They fiddle with their jewelry. We all do it. It's just that for some people, it's a bigger need. It happens more often throughout the day. And it isn't some of those smaller, not quite invisible behaviors, but those, the more accepted things. And so, yeah, absolutely. I had students who would pace the room.
Cool.
And that's how they learned. We could be reading. They were in, most of them seemed to be in, because it worked better for them to be able to do it in a reading class than in a writing or a math class. Mm-hmm. And so, they could pace the room the entire class period. And as long as I could ask them a question and they could answer it, I knew they were focusing on what we were doing. But that pacing is what helped them be able to focus. And I had a principal one time get very upset with me because when she came into my room to do my observation, I had this young man pacing. I had the kids, I said, this was like 20-ish years ago, and I, the whole flexible seating wasn't a big thing yet. Mm-hmm. But I said, you go in the room wherever you are comfortable.
Nice.
If you need to walk around, you need to walk around. If you need to stand, you stand. I had the gentleman who was walking around. I had another person who went underneath a desk in the corner of the room, and he put a sheet over the desk. And so, like, you only saw about this much of him. During those days when he would do that and it was his turn to read, he read so much better than on the days. And I got to a point where I stopped making kids read in round robins. I would just say, as long as you can tell me the first word of what would be your paragraph or your sentence to read, mm-hmm. so that I can know that you are paying attention and you are with us. You read that first word and then you say pass. And then we go on to the next student. Because there's so much involved in reading aloud.
Yes.
And for some kids, it's just never going to happen. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. If I want to listen to them read, I pull them aside at a separate time and have them read to me.
Cool.
But so I had the kid under the desk. I had the kid walking around. I had other kids who were kind of leaning back in their chairs, which, oh my goodness, that was a no-no. I had one kid sitting in a beanbag chair. I think I maybe had two that were actually at the table sitting in the chairs. The rest of them were just, all different ways. And the principal was like, you don't have any control over your classroom. And I said, I have more control right now than most of the teachers do that have all of their students sitting at their desks in their chairs, because those kids aren't learning.
Right.
You can ask any one of these kids, what is the topic of what we're reading? Where are we in the reading? And it was just mind-boggling to her because it was so different.
Wow.
But
That's
thankfully,
so powerful that you saw that.
Even back then, I felt, divinely given the gift to see.
Good.
These kids need these different things.
Yeah.
And so, like, the stimming. Okay, so somebody has to get up and walk. Okay, so somebody needs a fidget spinner or, some sort of fidget device, or they need a sensory object of some kind. They need bands on the desk to get that pressure. They need whatever it is.
Right.
And Fran asked this question a little bit ago. Why does society prefer masking over true self-presentation?
Right.
I don't know the answer to that. There's security behind the mask for the person masking. I agree with that.
Right.
Thanks. Way to teach to my students' needs. Yeah. But I do, and that's a hope with having #NoLimits.
Yes.
Is that people will see it's just a different way of being. It's not wrong.
Right.
If you don't understand why someone is up pacing or why someone, it's not because they're lazy. And I think that's the biggest misconception.
Yeah.
Is that, people who are up pacing or people who do their work differently than the majority of the population is able to do it.
Right.
That they're lazy, that they're trying to get out of it, that they're just weird. And I did want to, that triggered the thought that I'd had earlier that you're not broken. You said that earlier, that you felt like you were broken. And I hope you don't feel that way anymore, because you're not. As I said, every single person on the planet is beautifully and wonderfully made in the image of God. He made us exactly how we're supposed to be.
Right.
Nobody is broken.
Right.
Thank you. Not by any characteristic that we have. I mean, we've had things happen to us, and that kind of breaks us. But who we are is who we are. We are not broken.
Yes. That echoes like so strongly with, I think, the empowerment that comes from an autism diagnosis, or from any time that you get a glimpse of what is true for you, then all these assumptions of brokenness can be dropped, right? And while it is true, yes, things in life can push you to a breaking point, can test you, and can make you feel broken, people are far more resilient than we allow them to be. And I really want to acknowledge the power that you gave your students by allowing them to express in the way that they needed to. I bet for that person walking around the room while they read, their reading comprehension went through the roof.
Oh, absolutely.
Reading for me, I mean, I was a good reader as a kid, but my reading comprehension was always pretty low. It's been in my adulthood that reading has become better for me because I treat it as a form of meditation. Like it takes so much effort to focus in on the words that it closes my mind down, and that can be really helpful. But in a school setting, there's no way I was able to close off that much stimulation. If I had been allowed to walk while reading, you bet I would have had higher reading comprehension. But we sit us down a standardized test, right? And there's no movement at all during that, and you're supposed to...
Oh, did my face just say what I wasn't saying? I hate standardized tests. I'm just going to say it out loud for those on the podcast. I hate it. I hate them.
They're terrible.
Yeah.
And I was always good at them. I mean, relatively, I'd score high. And it was still like, those were terrifying days of class time. And I thank goodness I went through the school system before No Child Left Behind and all the changes that brought. But that's no way to gauge somebody's actual potential at all. I don't know who it's designed to work for.
It's designed to work for the population that learns the way that most teachers teach.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Unfortunately, we have more and more of the population that don't learn the way that the average teacher teaches.
Wow.
And so those tests are getting harder and harder, and for the students to take and to sit through and to do. It really irks me that teachers are held accountable, and some people's jobs are on the line dependent upon those scores.
That's terrifying.
Yes, because then all we've done is teach teachers to teach the students to take a test.
Right. And
because
that's how real learning works at all.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Especially not the type of learning that is required in the 2020s and 2030s. I mean, we have to be producing, and I'm not an educator at all, but I think about things like this, but we have to be teaching curiosity. Like that's probably the most competitive advantage thing in the modern workforce right now, is the ability to teach yourself, but to be curious enough to even know where to start or to want to start. That curiosity piece, that why is that the way that it is? Does it have to be that way? Can we take it a step farther? That's what the entrepreneurs and the inventors and the people who are going to really make a difference societally in the next 30, 40 years are going to have to be the people who have cultivated curiosity. Some people are born with it. That's great, an advantage they get to carry with them, and I hope that is nurtured in them. But for a lot of people, it's kind of a foreign concept. And if we get to a point where we could teach that in schools, reward curiosity, reward self-exploration, self-guided learning, I think that that is where, lifelong progress is going to happen for individuals. But anyway, I'm not an educator.
And
that's a lot to introduce.
There is a huge population of people who already are your curious people. They're not afraid to fail because they've had so much failure in school. Guess who those populations of people are?
Right, they're neurodivergents. They're people who've been disabled and labeled as disabled for too long.
Yeah, I mean, if you look through history at all of the people who are successful, whatever that exactly means, but that that we emulate as, oh, I want to be like that person because they're whatever.
Right.
There's a huge percentage that are neurodiverse.
Yes, absolutely. I am finding that to be extremely true. And even of the people who we don't traditionally think might be neurodiverse, the more I look into it, I'm like, yeah, okay. I'm seeing the spark, the commonality, the ability to stand apart from the normal condition, which is easier for folks that are on the spectrum. It's easier for folks who are neurodivergent. It's easier for folks that have been, treated as an outcast or left out of things. It's easier for us to take a stand, to experiment, probably because you said we're used to failing. We're more comfortable in that space. Once you do it a couple times, it's not that scary.
Right, exactly. You realize that the world doesn't end. You realize that your life still goes on, that you still have opportunities to do things. Right. We've gotten into a very weird sense in our society of not letting children fail and not letting them face their consequences of their mistakes. Right. And we are doing a huge disservice, in my opinion, to the child and to society in general. Eventually, when the child grows up and expects to always be right, and then is hit with, well, what do you mean I'm not right? What do you mean I don't get rewarded just because I showed up today? Yeah, that's not how life is. We can't. Life can't be like that. No,
it can't last for long. I will 100% echo what you just said and drive that home. It is easiest to learn failure in childhood. That is the safest place to learn it. It should be. I realize in some households it can be pretty risky, but if you can learn to fail in the safe space while you're a kid, while you're a teenager, you are set up for a lot more success going forward. Learning how to fail in your 20s, it's painful. Learning how to fail in your 30s is catastrophic. So, yes, echoing everything you just said, parents, teachers, allowing for that failure to happen, building the resilience muscle in kids is going to make the rest of their life less painful, and potentially prevent, pretty catastrophic burnouts like I experienced in my 30s, which was awakening. It was worth it for me. But man, if that would have happened in my teens, if I would have had enough willingness to fail as a teenager so that I recognized that I was on the spectrum earlier, I would have been farther along on my path to doing what I think I was sent here to do. Now I'm figuring it out in my 40s, and thank goodness. And some people don't figure it out to their 50s, 60s, or ever, and they live with this sense that they're not quite right. So I'm lucky to have it now. But gee, yeah, if I would have had that intervention earlier, how far along would I be? I could really be, my special interest would have taken me pretty far by now, I suspect.
Quite possibly, yeah. And it's so true to just to because I do feel like, and I already forgot the word you said, the synesthesia. How do you say it? Synesthesia?
Synesthesia.
Synesthesia. I feel like that's a superpower, and your special interests and just diving into those special interests and really, I have interests. There's a few things that I'm more interested in, but I don't know that my personality has the ability to really, I guess mine would be special education law if I had to pick something, because I really love that and I really understand that and how to write the IEP and, what's supposed to be in the IEP and how to do it, in the best way possible. So I guess that would be my special interest. But there's so many beautiful aspects of humans
Yes.
in general. But when you add in some neurodiversity and you pull out all the things that we have tried to squelch for so many years, if we let those things blossom from that caterpillar into that butterfly, the amount of beauty that we could have is exponential, I believe.
Yes. Yeah. We like you said, we are given the traits that we have for a reason. And if we're all expressing that to its highest purpose, we will have a very colorful, in all the right ways, society that is more resilient in the face of the big changes that we know are happening in our society.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Katie, we just have a couple minutes left, so I want to give you opportunity. If there's anything that you like, oh, I really wanted to say, now is your chance to do that.
Well, I think I got a little bit even more than I planned to say out. So
okay, good.
Appreciate your patience and letting me tell my story and letting me get out there a little bit. I guess I will end on the note that the book that I'm writing right now, since I write books, is really about this experience of unmasking and figuring out how to live closer to my highest purpose and my true calling. I hope to have it, out self-published probably in the next several months. So if folks want to follow along with that journey, and or if they want to take the burnout monitor test to see if they're getting close to a burnout period, just go to my website, karapaceconsulting.com. You can sign up for my newsletter there, and that's how you'll find out if my book gets published. It's coming. And also where you can take that burnout monitor, download that burnout monitor. So
Awesome.
that's probably my main takeaway, ways I can help folks going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And Fran says also, thank you for sharing your journey. I have very much enjoyed getting to learn about your journey. I find everyone's journey is so beautiful and wonderful, and no one's journey is the same as anyone's else. I've had other women who have been diagnosed with autism as adults, but your journeys are different. Yeah. And, I think it's important to share. So again, everybody sees it's okay. It's okay. Just accept it. Try to understand it. If you're having trouble understanding it, ask the person. I don't understand why you do whatever, or I don't understand how come this.
Right.
I've not found people that if you genuinely are curious, that they shut you down and go, I don't know. You're rude for asking. Right. If they feel that it's genuine, I've not had bad responses to that. So anyway, thank you for being here. Thank you for connecting with me on LinkedIn, accepting my my link request, friend request wrong platform. That's Facebook. For next week, this next week will be for teachers. I will be having a group of people on from ESGI. It is a data collecting platform. So getting you ready to go back to school and get that data collection. I met them back in March at a teacher conference and found them really exciting and having some really cool stuff going on. So tune in next week, same time, same place. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you know when I'm going live. Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.
Hey, parents and teachers, are you tired of IEP meetings that feel like a battle? Let's put an end to the tension and create a collaborative, calm, and respectful environment together. Shelley Kino, your go-to IEP consultant, can transform your meetings into positive and productive experiences. With Shelley Kino, your child is her top priority, your voice is heard, and you become confident. Shelley Kino is making the world better for all, one IEP at a time. Visit www.shelleykino.com for more information and set up your free 20-minute consultation today. That's shelleykino.com, SHELLEYKENOW.